Morena, good morning, and welcome back to those who regularly tune into Westpac Smarts, and a warm welcome to those tuning in for the first time. I'm Warrick Gibbs, Head of Construction, Transport and Forestry for Westpac Business Banking. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by three incredibly talented panelists to share their knowledge and experiences with you in navigating today's topic: why sustainability is important to small businesses. We've hit the jackpot with the topic. The record registrations, particularly from small businesses, which is really great to see. And just for some housekeeping to kick off, today's session is scheduled to run for 45 minutes, and we have some flex to run overtime should we get a lot of questions at the end. The first 30 minutes will be a discussion with the panel, leaving plenty of time for questions and answers. If you've attended a webinar of ours before, you'll know the drill on how to register questions for the panel. But if you're a first-time caller, let me run through the process for you. There'll be a question and answers running on the right-hand side of your screen. So register your questions as they come to mind, and please indicate the panelist you'd like to direct them to. If you spot a question someone else has written you feel is something you too would like answered, click on it and that'll increase the rating, and we'll work our way through those that have the highest rating first. Briefly, a little bit about my role at Westpac as Head of Industry. My focus is connecting with our customers and captains of the industry to gain a better understanding of the industry they operate in. I set the strategy and direction for our relationship managers across the country, developing insights with our economists to deepen our relationship with our customers. So let's start to understand the size of the sustainability prize. Small businesses collectively make up 90% of business worldwide and affect the livelihoods of 2 billion people. Their combined carbon footprint is estimated to contribute 60 to 70% of industrial pollution. Yet most businesses have not implemented decarbonisation strategies. And as I work around the country speaking with small businesses about sustainability, I'm often hearing comments, "This is not a small business issue," or "We're too small to make a significant impact." And often businesses are worried about the skills that they don't have or the knowledge to tackle the climate crisis. And some only think that it applies to large corporates. And that may be true of sustainability focus of where it has been in the past, but it has a ripple effect. We're all here on this planet as caretakers for the next generation. And we have a lot of good reason to be optimistic for the future sustainability of the planet. If I can just bring context to sustainability and how we bring the focus today. If we look back to December the 12th, 2015, 195 governments, New Zealand being one of them, came to Paris and unanimously decided to intentionally change the course of the global economy in order to protect the most vulnerable and to improve the life for all of us. And when you consider the enormity of that, think of what it is like in your own home to gain agreement about who's going to put the recycling out or who's going to feed the scraps to the worm farm. It is simply a remarkable achievement. And what makes it even more remarkable is the work that dates back to 1988, when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was born. And there was a general accepted attitude that there was no problem, and most people stuck their heads in the sand and carried on life as usual. But what has changed between 1988 and now? It's one that has a tone of the conversation. There is now a common understanding from all 196 countries that change can be in their interest. So with that, let's introduce our panellists who are helping to shape New Zealand's sustainable landscape and to share their journey, what their focus is, and some ideas on how to get started. First, if I can introduce Julie Lindenberg, CEO of Kogo. Julie is a respected leader in the digital banking and carbon emissions industry, tasked with building Kogo's reputation as a category leader in climate solutions. Julie is building a cross-disciplinary team that will empower millions of businesses and consumers to understand their carbon footprint and how they can take action to reduce and offset their impact. A warm welcome to you, Julie. Thank you very much for joining us today. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Keitha Turner, owner of Recreational Services. Keitha brings a career of systems development and management for large corporates and extensive experience in a range of project management and reporting software tools. Her energy and communication skills have been pivotal in the successful delivery of new systems, training programs to staff, and is the driving force behind Recreational Services EnviroMark Diamond certification through Toitu. Thanks for joining the panel, Keitha, and look forward to chatting with you shortly. And lastly, but no means least, David Benattar is Chief Sustainability Officer at the Warehouse Group, one of New Zealand's largest publicly listed retailers and the third major retailer globally to become carbon neutral. David sits on the advisory board to the New Zealand Sustainable Business Council and has represented the Climate Leaders Coalition at COP25 in Madrid and COP26 in Glasgow. While I've got you, David, on the screen, can we start today's discussion with you briefly zooming out of New Zealand to understand the global picture? David, as New Zealand Leaders Coalition representative in Glasgow, how are the 126 participating countries performing against this target to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees? And is New Zealand delivering upon its promise?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Warrick, big question you're asking me this morning, and that's a really great question to ask ourselves, because there is no clear cut today on our ability to reach the targets set at the Paris Agreement. But what we know is that on current trajectory, we will be out to about plus 2.7 degrees if you look at the sum of the commitments and pledges made at COP26 in Glasgow. So are we on target? No, we're not. Are we making progress? That's the question. And I believe we are. What was obvious in Glasgow, even more than in Madrid at COP25, in Glasgow, the business community was there. There was a show of force from the business community, industry, and the finance sector to ask themselves, what can we do to accelerate the decarbonization of our economies? Why were they there? It's because governments are giving signals that they are ready to really incentivize and regulate the behaviors around decarbonization. They are ready to incentivize positive behaviors to see a real transition across industry sectors, energy, transportation, farming and agriculture, food systems, and so forth and so forth. So when people ask me what happened in Glasgow, what I would say in short is that there was an incredible amount of energy, both from the business, public, private sector, to come together and really say, how can we go faster? And how can we create value from this decarbonization effort? Because as we know, business likes to go where there is value. And today, there is real value in participating in the decarbonization effort, whatever your activity sector is, and whatever size of company you are.
I think that's a wonderful introduction, David, and it really does help to build the picture of our progress to date, but also the work that we've got ahead of us. David, can I turn our attention now to New Zealand? The warehouse has been carbon neutral since 2019. You're the third major retailer and the first large company in New Zealand to achieve this status. So congratulations to the warehouse.
Thank you.
Can you share with us when the warehouse started on their sustainability journey and how you started to measure your carbon footprint? And lastly, how this has framed your strategy for the future?
Sure, absolutely. So we started to measure and report our carbon emissions in 2012. So quite a few years ago. And when you use the word journey, it is exactly what it is. Any organization should expect that the transformation and evolution around sustainability is a journey, because you need to understand where you are and you need to define where you want to be. And these states of where you are and where you want to be will constantly evolve based on the dynamics of the market, based on your consumer behaviors and expectations, based on your competitors' behaviors. So there is a number of forces that are informing what you do. At the warehouse, we made a number of leadership statements and positions because we believe this is the right thing to do. We believe also it's our responsibility because of our visibility and presence in New Zealand, our leadership role in the country, which we take very seriously. So for us to take this carbon neutral position in 2019 was a logical evolution of our history, our carbon emissions reporting and certification with Toy2 and VeroCare, and the understanding at that time that we needed to do something and that the market was expecting us to do something. So that's what took us to do there. Behind that, there was lots of work to measure, monitor, certify, understand the sources of emissions, understand and prioritize where we can actually have impact, where we can change the trajectories, what is in our control and what is out of our control. What can we directly change versus what can we influence? And so I would really recognize for everyone around the table here that it is a complex exercise that does require collaboration, requires insights and technical expertise. And that's what we've decided to do as an organization and continuing to do actually, because that journey continues.
That's fantastic, David. Thank you very much. It's very insightful, but I think some of the key things there I've taken is, there are some things that are in your control and there's some things that are out of your control, and it's those things that are in your control that you can strategically bring to your business, but it's also the influence of what your customer is asking for and
Absolutely.
Where competitors are going.
So just to build on that, things that are in your control are the choices you make, for example, on your transportation, on your vehicle fleet, on your source of energy. There are things that are in your direct control. Things that your indirect control is how your suppliers are behaviors or how your partners are behaviors. You can influence that, but it is out of your control. And as you said, it's an exercise in prioritization and really understanding and speaking with your stakeholders and speaking with your customers and speaking with your vendors, engaging every day with them to understand where you can make a difference. And then in many ways, being humble about it, being both ambitious and humble about it, so that you can take everybody around you on the journey and have the most impact through the journey. I'm sure my colleagues here around the table, Julie and Keitha, you can all probably share some type of similar experience in how you move in your organizations.
That's a wonderful lead in. Thank you, David, to me bringing in Keitha into the conversation. Keitha, as a business owner, you've had first-hand experience at identifying the need to evolve your business to become more sustainable. And for some small businesses, just knowing where to start can sometimes be a little bit daunting. Can you share how your business started your journey?
Well, We started a long time ago. We started in 2004 and recognised that something needed to be done, something needed to be changed. And we got introduced to Toitu Enviromark, which was basically Toitu was a government organisation that was pushing Enviromark. And we started there. We started small. We the first 4 years was learning. And we went from kind of bronze to diamond, and we learned about aspects and impacts and what were the most important things that we could do or could control, and where were the areas we could focus on. But we also had not a small focus, a 1+1+1 focus. We couldn't do big things. We couldn't afford to do big things at that stage, or our thinking wasn't there. So we had very much a philosophy of 1+1+1 will one day equal a lot, and everyone had to do their part. But it is about investigating and knowing what there is, and you do need some help on the journey, and I would recommend that. And Enviromark was our help. From there, it kind of has grown. So for the first 10 years, it definitely was a 1+1. It became part of our culture. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of nagging, a lot of continuous improvement focus kind of thing. We looked to bring in our staff, involve our staff. So we looked for award recognition, so that they would get to know us, get to know it a bit better. I'm just going to twist a little bit. So the sun's not in my eyes. Award recognition, and also making people aware that there are things they're doing that need to be shared. So a little depot in one area, what they're doing to make environment better or do their part to the environment can be used throughout the whole company. So systems that would improve that. So always focusing on the 1+1 at that stage. However, what I can say is that over the last 3-4 years, there's been a ground shift. Basically, what used to be, when you used to go for kind of contracts, your processes were what basically sold the story a little bit, whereas now it's your actions that sell the story. And you actually have to show that you're actually doing things that have made a difference. And you can't just do it at an organisational level. You've got to do it at a area level and a division level. So everyone has to be on board. And I think that is the biggest ground shift over the last kind of few years, is that you can't just talk about it. You've actually got to do something, and you've got to actually have strong actions and plans in place. 2 years ago, we started on the Toitu Toitu Carbon Reduce program. And even though we had looked at carbon reduction all along, again, with the emergency, kind of environmental emergency declared by our customers and councils, it gave us greater focus. So again, you've got to look at it, but I think the difference is now we're looking at some of the bigger projects. But to get started, you've got to get started on the little projects. You've got to do all those little ones first, and then you can move to your bigger ones. So it's not a frightening process. It's just a process, and it's just a program, and it takes commitment. So as I was saying, our suppliers have changed over the last 3 years. Our knowledge has grown, and we're always learning. And I think also that we see sustainability a little bit different now. We see it as environment, people, community, equity, diversity. It's the whole sustainability story that you're looking at and the picture you're looking at. And my advice goes back to what David was saying, is that if you're looking at something, look at yourself internally and what sustainability projects can add value to your business. And therefore, it becomes a worthwhile and easy thing to do. You've got to look at the big picture in the world and all that sort of stuff. But also, say you're a food company, focusing on the sustainability of people not be starving is a great thing. Everyone do their 1+1+1s, but do your other stuff as well. So that's kind of where we're coming from. So basically, 1+1s to get started, big picture comes with it. Bigger projects come along for the ride. But you're looking for a focus on commitment and culture throughout your organisation to make it actually work. So you got to bring everyone in on the journey. Hope that helps.
That's wonderful, Keitha. I think I could possibly just sit here and listen to your story all day. The key things taking away there is, you're 1 + 1, and you started 10 years ago on that journey, as did the warehouse. They started a very long time ago, but you do have to start somewhere, and then those incremental changes expand, and those circles get bigger on what you're actually delivering, one, to your business, but also to the wider community. I'd like to now bring in Julie, if I can. Julie, rich data collection and comparisons run through the veins of Kogo. How are the majority of sustainability trends evolving, and what can you anticipate next?
Hi, Warrick. Thank you. Yes, you're right. We're always undertaking research, and from both individuals and businesses' perspective. And actually, we've just finished a piece of research which interviewed 600 SME businesses across New Zealand, Australia, and the UK to find out what motivates them. And there's kind of 3 segments that have come out of that. So there's the starters, which is like, please help me get started. The committers, which is, I know how to start, but I need help with the follow through. And then there's the measurers, so like, make this process easier for me, which is kind of what Keitha was talking about. In terms of sustainability trends, the biggest drivers are empowering businesses with the ability for them to measure, reduce, and offset their carbon footprint. It's the kind of the fastest growing trend, and it's both like stick real regulation and pull from customer demand. That research that I was talking about found out through regulation that 73% of New Zealanders agree that they expect the government will require all businesses to prove they're considering their impact on the climate within the next 5 to 10 years. So that's coming quite fast, that people are expecting we're going to get some kind of regulation coming through. And also we're seeing greater customer demand when they're choosing products around sustainability. New Zealanders as a whole are living more sustainable lives. It's about 43% of Kiwis are committed to sustainability, which is up 7% from last year. But interestingly, 63% of small businesses believe that customers see good price as more important than being environmentally friendly. But we are seeing a move in that space. So Keitha was talking a little bit around the market and competition and being able to share their journey as part of bidding on work. And that is that kind of customer demand that people are seeing, that they want to understand what people are doing in their businesses around sustainability. 75% think that that view of price being more important than environment is actually changing, and that they're wanting to prioritise sustainability over price. We're also seeing similar demands with employment engagement and retention. People want to work for companies that have more of a sustainability bent, and people tend to be able to be retained as well if they're doing that. So when we think of competition, I think we think of market competition, but given the scarcity of resources these days, I think we would say that employees are looking at competition as well, and they're looking at alternate businesses and looking at what they're doing around the sustainability space. We were talking a little bit around empowerment and what do SME businesses do. How do they start? Because it is can be quite an overwhelming journey. It feels like such a big problem, but how do I start? And my recommendation would be just start with measurement. Start understanding what your carbon footprint is. Improve your carbon literacy. Like we talk about, there's a lot of talk about financial literacy. We like to talk about carbon literacy. Like, what is my business's carbon footprint? Is that a good footprint or not? How do I compare to similar industries? Start kind of building up your knowledge in that space. and then start with a plan. David was talking about like know where you are and know where you want to go. It's a similar thing. Know what your number is and know where you want it to go. And you know, we know for SME businesses that will be different because you've got to balance impact, time, cost, what's relevant for your sector. So it's not a one size fits all. It's really relevant to you as a company. Confusion about what to do and impact is a real clear insight from our research. So I would agree totally, start small and start thinking about what can I do right now that's not going to take up a lot of time, but starts to build my carbon literacy knowledge.
That's an enormous amount of information to digest. But I think, you know, as starting blocks, you know, there's a push that's that the public are seeing that may come from the government. There's obviously nothing there at this stage, but it sounds like the public who have replied to your survey are seeing that there is potential impacts coming in the future where government regulation may come in. Which is super interesting, but it goes on. Your survey goes on to quite some detail. How accessible are the results of that survey to the public?
Very. If you look up Kogo CoGO on LinkedIn, the article's there. I've also recently republished it on LinkedIn as well, so it is available. I would expect it's on our website as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's got very interesting research specifically around SME businesses. So, yeah.
Great. And if I remember rightly, that looked at the UK, Australia, and New Zealand.
New Zealand, that's correct.
Wonderful. Julie, responding to the challenges created by climate change can spur on all sorts of innovation for businesses, from improving the efficiencies of supply chain, which is a big challenge for us all around the world right now, to motivating the development of less carbon intensive products. How are you seeing businesses react to these challenges?
There's quite a broad spectrum in the way that people are responding. There are some businesses which are really embracing it and seeing it as kind of a new revenue stream, like companies like ours, for example. You know, we've been born out of this emergence that we're seeing in carbon focus. And then recently I was in the Allbirds shop, and Allbirds and Adidas have come up with the lowest carbon footprint shoe that Adidas has ever produced. So, you know, it is definitely on, you know, some people's companies' minds, but I would say that some of that is all related to intent. So there are some companies which have intent to act and they have the resources to act, and they've been the movers in the market. So like Allbirds and Adidas, for example, you know, they've got the intent and they've got the resources and the money behind them in order to act on that intent. And then there are some SME businesses who have a good intent but just don't know where to start. And those that have the intent but don't have the money, or they have an issue with resources, which is a barrier to them starting their journey. Again, I would reiterate, yes, it's a barrier, but there are very small steps that you can take. That means that it doesn't need to be a barrier. And then there's those who sit on the far side of the spectrum, which is like they're not interested. You know, like, this is not my problem, I can't make a difference. And I would argue that over time, it might not be short term, it might be long term, that those companies may become more irrelevant in the market, because we're going to see more competition coming and people looking more at sustainability. There could be carbon regulation coming on small businesses. We're seeing a change in customer demand and employment engagement, and that potentially will push people out of the market. So I think we're seeing, you know, quite a big spectrum on what it, you know, on how people are responding. But I actually had some really specific examples that I thought I could share for SME businesses around some small things that you could do, that if you felt like, actually, I haven't started, but I don't know what to start, and it, you know, it all seems overwhelming. So one would be like, think about your travel for your business. And I'm not suggesting you go out and buy EVs. Like, if you can, that's amazing, but that's not what we're all able to do. Even just one less flight and having an online meeting will save 219 kilos of CO2. And that's just, one internal domestic flight. There are new apps out there. We're just trialing one called Mevo, and this is not a plug for them because I've not used them, but they're a like electric carpooling app that you can like drop off cars and pick them up from spaces. So particularly in central business districts, that if you need to get around the city, that you can just pick up a car and drop it at a different place. So there's like lots of new like innovation and ideas coming through, and I think you need to constantly be thinking about that and investigating it. Embrace the power of plants. So most of us have milk in our fridges at work. Change a few of those milk orders to be plant-based or do a hybrid, and it's going to save you 20 kilos of CO2 on a 10-litre purchase. And cut the red meat. Now, I know that this is very controversial. I don't think I could cut the red meat out of my household, but maybe if you're doing, a catering event, just say no red meat, and then it's actually going to save you 40% of your average CO2 for every dollar you spend. And then the other one is like changing your light bulbs. You can buy more energy efficient light bulbs, and that's such a small step, but it is a step on the beginning of your journey, and it will start increasing your awareness.
That's wonderful advice, Julie, and I think some really practical tips on linking back to what Keitha was saying, the 1%, 1%, 1%, and those little incremental steps that we all can make, not just businesses, every single individual in New Zealand will help us all to get towards that goal. Now, I'm not sure if the technician can help me here, but I'm welcoming all panelists back onto the screen for the next couple of questions. And the question is around the sustainability plan and how it's influencing the way that we deal with suppliers and who we choose to work with. And I'm going to point to David first, if I can. David, how is your sustainability plan influencing the suppliers you choose to work with?
It's influencing it greatly, Warrick. It's a great question because our suppliers are the ones that are making the products that we bring to the countries and sell to our customers. So it's really important that we work with our sourcing and merchandising team to remove plastics from our packaging. To transition to sustainable packaging solutions, to use more and more certified ingredients. For example, FSC certified for all our wood and paper products. 100% of our paper and wood products use FSC certified paper. That's fantastic. And that comes from how we work with our suppliers. Then we have to specify transitioning, for example, all our apparel to better cotton. Better cottons, which is sourced from better farming practices using less fertilizer, less pesticide, with fair wages to the farmers. Then we have about 27 different certifications on ingredients. It's a one-by-one piece of work that our entire organization and sourcing team in New Zealand and in Shanghai are driving together. So my point to you guys is sustainability is full of everyday decisions. There's not one single decision that escapes the lens of sustainability. And that's what the opportunity is about. So you have to create first the mindset and the culture. And then you have to look at the technical skills. So look, for us, we work with our suppliers, but we are also a supplier to you guys. Many SMEs are buying from us. They're sourcing for different type of products. They're sourcing tech products or supply for furniture. They're sourcing different type of products. So also when we go to meet these people, we tell you, well, look at how we're transitioning our catalog. Look at our category of products that are more sustainable. So some of you customers of the Warehouse Group, as a commercial customer, ask us, what can we offer you that is more sustainable as a solution? Because we do the same thing with our suppliers, with our logistics suppliers, with our transportation partners, with our energy and electricity partners. We ask to everybody, which means that we have in our policy and our procurement documents sections dedicated to interviewing our suppliers on their ESG and sustainability performance. They have to fill the boxes. We ask them, what is your practice and policies around your employees? What is your practice and policies around environmental impact, around your greenhouse gas emissions? Do you report your emissions? Do you measure them? Do you certify them? When you work with suppliers, you have a relationship, right? It's a partnership, it's a collaboration with your suppliers. So you can ask them the questions and you can reward them and incentivize them for having the right behaviors. So again, I think this is part of what you can do as a small business and what we are doing as a large business. So just to repeat it, for whoever of you are clients of the Warehouse Group, ask us these questions. And if you are clients of other suppliers, ask them the questions. Because each time you ask the question, it's raising the level of awareness from your suppliers. It's helping them making the right decisions, adopting the right behaviors. So again, it's a dialogue.
And I just think it's asking the question with examples too, because that's what I think has changed. As I was saying, our customers now don't want just, have you got a plan? They want to know, have you got a plan and what's being achieved? And that's the same for our suppliers now. What is the difference is that in the past we'd say, have you got a plan? And now you ask the question, have you got a plan and how does that impact on us? And what are you doing that will make a difference for us? And that kind of is the whole flow-on effect, and that is the groundswell change.
That's exactly right, and thank you, David, and thank you, Keitha. It comes from both ends, doesn't it? It's a fully integrated decisioning process around sustainability. It comes from the customer who's demanding a supply chain change in the way that we are sustainable as businesses, but it also comes from the corporate or the owner of the business asking the right questions to fulfill their obligation around their own sustainability plan.
Warrick, can I add one point before we move to the next question?
Sure.
So among the SMEs around the table here listening to us today, I assume some of them are also suppliers to our government, because our government is buying a lot of goods and services in every category of goods and services. And our government today is systematically integrating broader impact and broader impact metrics in its standards, which means that if you want to have our government as your customer, also you should prepare yourself so that you can answer questions about carbon emissions, about waste reduction, about diversity and inclusion, about how you're supporting young people to access new skills and new development platforms. So again, I think the entire ecosystem of New Zealand is evolving, and it's in our collective interest to look at all these opportunities to have these conversations when we engage commercially. So you as SMEs have an opportunity to grow your business because you're doing what Julie is explaining, what Keitha is explaining, what I am explaining. It will benefit you not in 3 years, not in 5 years. It will benefit you now. So look at it as a commercial investment, because that's the right lens to ensure that you can actually accelerate the practice.
Thank you, David. That's very insightful and great insights for the audience today. Can I now just direct a question to yourself, Keitha? We've had a couple of discussions around this. The borders are now, they're closed but slowly opening. But all of New Zealand is finding it difficult to find good people. How is your sustainability plan in your business? How is that helping in your recruitment of new people?
A couple of ways. The first way I'd say is that the younger generation are much more savvy, but what Julie was saying, they're much more knowledgeable about the environmental impacts and sustainability than the older generations. And they look at companies. And they look for the detail and they choose companies they like because of the sustainability factor. So if you don't have that story and that program as part of your kind of toolbox, you're on the back foot straight away. And then it does go to retention, is that if you don't actually achieve things and have actions that are backing it up, you're again on the back foot away again. So I think it's not a case of having a sustainability plan. It's not having one, and not having that in your toolbox to attract staff and keep staff. The other factor of our sustainability plan is what we were talking about earlier, is that it's just not environmental. It's, equity, diversity plans, what you're doing in those programs. And for us, one of the traditional sources of recruitment was, say, Seek. And now you've got to look at the non-traditional sources, and which are your equity, diversity kind of areas, like Mahi for the Future, social enterprise groups, women's groups, Asia Pacific, Workbridge, all those other avenues that can perhaps widen your thinking and your equity, diversity, and all that sort of stuff, and therefore more staff opportunities. So it's kind of twofold. One, it's the story and the actions again, and that you've got to have that story in your toolbox. And two, you've got to be much broader in your thinking and where you're looking for staff and how you're looking for staff, and bringing them into the culture that you are of a sustainable business. So, yeah, quite different. But the younger generation definitely are much more savvy about the whole thing.
Yes, yeah. And David, you're a very large employer of New Zealand as well through the Warehouse Group. Are you seeing similar attributes there?
Yes, I do see it. Our team members are incredibly passionate, and they are a tough crowd.
Yeah.
So you better be ready for the challenge.
Yes.
They want it, and they're fast. And they get it.
Yeah. And Julie, statistics, what are they saying around employees?
Well, I don't have a statistic on me right at the second, but I can tell you that we've been hiring quite a lot at Kogo, and I have been incredibly surprised, given we're a tech company, given how hard tech is to recruit for at the moment, the caliber of applications that we have seen. Is quite incredible and quite humbling.
Yes.
And to me, it feels like it's we're starting to see some kind of groundswell around people wanting to be more aligned around sustainability. Now, working for a company that focuses on sustainability is not for everyone, but it is interesting that we're hearing a lot of people saying, actually, post-pandemic, I'm now thinking, actually, I want to do something good. I want to, align my personal values with my work values as well.
Yeah.
One of the questions that we've been asking people is, where do you sit on your sustainability journey at a personal level? And it's a super interesting question to ask. Now, I appreciate that it might not be appropriate for all companies, but I would say, if one of your drivers is around sustainability and around, looking at sustainability as a whole and how can we bring new talent into the company that has a focus on that, it's quite a good question to ask, because you get some quite interesting responses.
The one thing too is that employees, the new employees or that generation very, very much want you to zoom out. They want you to just not think about your company, but the impact your company has on the wider world. And I quite like that term, zoom out, is that just not, whatever you do has an impact, and it has and if you can do the smallest thing or a bigger thing, consider what it's doing for the better good of the whole world. And there is definitely a change in that thinking, that's who we need to be. That's who a company needs to be.
Warrick, I want to make a point I think that I should share here, is that you ask us about our employees today. I also want to tell you about our future employees. You will not be able to work, or you will not be as qualified, and you will certainly not be in the first rank of potential candidates to work at the Warehouse Group if you do not have a view and an approach to sustainability. So it goes both ways. We being candidates and employees are moving us very quickly in that direction. And we are also making it a requirement to work in the business. And that will become the norm for every large organization and every SME, because we need the skills, but we also need alignment. You cannot drive a transformation of that scale if not everybody understands what the opportunity is. Then it's our obligation to bring the tools and the training and the culture to support that growth.
Yeah.
But you also need to have people who are aligned on the vision.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fundamental transformation of the labor market and the profile of the employees, a bit like 5 years ago or 10 years ago. You were expecting now to see candidates understand what digital transformation is about, what technology can do to society, what technology can do to business, at least having a view on it, right? You would say today a candidate needs to have either some experience, a point of view, or qualifications around technology, while sustainability is becoming that very quickly. So that's I think, something to monitor.
Thank you so much. We are going well on time, but I think I'd like to turn to questions if I can. And I'm going to turn my head to my other computer just while I read them. We do have a number popping through. If I can start the first one, which is how much impact on global warming increases can New Zealand make if we meet our targets? So this is talking about as in the global temperature increases will be reduced by a set percentage if New Zealand reaches its goal. So I think I'll turn to you, David, for that one.
Yeah, I'll make a quick answer so we can carry on. Under this question, there is an underlying position that what we do doesn't matter. So I reject that fully. The reason why I reject that is that any country in the world can say that. France, for example, which is where I come from initially, says, well, we are 2% of the global emissions. So what does it matter if we meet our reduction targets? If everybody around the table says that, where are we going to go, guys? So my response is New Zealand can have a tremendous impact on meeting the Paris Accord targets, because we can stand as an example in the world as a small nation who is able to transform, and where this transformation is not easy for two reasons. Number one, we already have a very high share of renewable energy. Number two, we have a big farming sector and economy that relies on an economic sector which is difficult to decarbonize because of methane and all the reasons we know. So if New Zealand is able to do it, many countries should look at us and say, what they did is an achievement, and we should encourage positive behaviors.
That's a great summary. Thank you, David. I think what that talks to at a global level is the same thing that we talk about at a business level, the 1%, 1%, 1%.
Okay.
Every country throughout the globe all has to make a difference. I'll now move to, there is a question here again for you, David. How do you account for carbon in your supply chain in your carbon zero calculation?
So under carbon zero and greenhouse gas protocol, we do not account for scope 3 emissions made by our suppliers in our footprint. This said, we are doing everything we can to influence the reduction of these emissions. These emissions happen in China, Bangladesh, and India, some of them in New Zealand also, because we have about 7% of our supplier base in New Zealand. But so in the emissions outside, we will have a direct control. So this is where we are. Our carbon neutrality includes our operational emissions, our logistics emissions, transportations, electricity emissions. They do not include the product sourced emissions, but we are still working to influence them and reduce them.
That's great. Thank you. This last question that I'm going to position for the panel. Are there any innovations within the sustainability space within New Zealand or internationally that would make a difference for small businesses that's not been mentioned this morning? And they understand there's not a silver bullet, but are there anything that would make the difference for SMEs?
Let me tackle that to begin with. I think it's a very broad question because I think it depends on what type of SME business you're in. I think there are a few things, but I don't think, when I think of innovation, I think of technology innovation. But I don't think it has to be technology, and I don't think we should rely on technology to solve our problems. Because there are so many different ways we can tackle carbon emissions and global warming. Technology is one element of it. And don't get me wrong, I'm a strong technology advocate. That's what my company does. But I also think that there is a lot of change that needs to happen. And I guess I would call it innovative change in just thought leadership and people's mindsets around sustainability. I think education and awareness is probably the biggest shift we need people to see from a personal and SME perspective. Now, that's, for some people, that's very innovative thinking. It's very different, and it's not what they would normally, do or consider. But I think the best thing you can do is arm yourself and educate yourself and talk to people. Attend things like this, like start that education process around, because that will help you in your knowledge, but then you can share that knowledge with other people, and that will start creating a bigger groundswell. In terms of like technology innovation, if that's what the question is, I'd say it really does depend a lot on the industry that you're in, as to what you see. Would you say that EVs are now a big technology innovation? With the price of petrol, it probably is. And actually I'm super keen to understand what's going to happen with petrol stations in the next 20, 30 years, because we're definitely seeing some groundswell in that. So does that mean your tractor is going to be an EV? I don't know. I think there's some new innovations that will come about. But my suggestion would be to start thinking innovatively, but I'm sure my panelists have got other ideas as well.
I think it's the thinking and always being open to exploring the new ideas of kind of technology. As a small business, you've done it this way for so many years, and that's how you've been successful. You've got to be open to have an EV, as an example, or a tractor that is by electric. And if you don't trial some of these things, or don't go and source information about what is coming. So say you do know, as an example, that you need a new tractor in 2 years, 3 years, and there is an electric tractor coming, put it in the horizon. But if you don't actually know and you're not looking, you're going to miss on those opportunities. So it goes back to that education part. You've got to broaden your mind up.
I'll build on that. First, I love what you both said. I think you're right on. And the example of the tractor is perfect, because you really have to look for it. And it's there. Guys, it's everywhere. There is innovation happening at every corner in New Zealand and around the world. We are now in a new stage of sustainability transformation, and that transformation is happening at the same speed as the digital transformation of the past 20 years. So watch out. You can look into the food categories, look at the raglan yogurt, coconut-based yogurt, which at the end displace some of the dairy milk carbon emissions. There is innovations on the charging stations being deployed at high pace in New Zealand with New Zealand companies and American companies into our market. There is innovation from companies like Kogo, who is bringing new technology to understand footprint. There is another one, S360, who is, I believe, based in Christchurch, and who is helping SMEs understand their ESG impact metrics. There is innovation from carbon waste into feedstock. That's happening in Lanzatech, which was a New Zealand company now operating in the US and around the world. So this is why what Keitha and Julie said is so important. It's the mindset. Look for it. It's everywhere. And you'll find some for your specific sector.
Look, that's a wonderful wrap up there, David, Julie, and Keitha. We could obviously keep going on this topic, and there is a lot more to share, but at least this is really engaging our sustainability juices into thinking about what it is that we can individually do within our businesses. So to close, we've now converged on a common path, a common direction of travel that's going to take us several decades, and over those decades take us to a new economy, a decarbonised, highly resilient economy. However, the national contributions that are currently on the table are insufficient to take us to a stabilised climate, but they are just the first step. What do we need to do as small businesses in New Zealand? Contributing to different intensities from different approaches in different sectors, but everyone contributing to a common goal and along the path for environmental integrity. We've got a lot of work to do, and we need to make sure we redouble our efforts over the next 5 years. It is those 5 years that are the urgent 5 years. We've come from the impossible to now the unstoppable. We've gone from the confrontation now to collaboration. And we have been trained to believe that there is always winners and there's losers, that your loss was my gain. We are now in a world that has reached planetary boundaries. We're not just so interconnected, but increasingly interdependent of each other. Your loss is no longer my gain. We're either all losers or we all can be winners. We're going to have to decide between zero benefit for all or living as a sum of all of us. Unfortunately, we have now run out of time, but before you go, first-time callers and long-time listeners, there will be a survey on your screen just to the right, and I'd really appreciate it if you could give us some feedback on today's webinar, and we'd really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Julie, Keitha and David, for joining the Westpac Smarts today. The discussion has been fascinating. Thank you all, the audience, for taking time out of your busy days. There will be a follow-up email that does have a recording of this webinar. Finally, thank you and have a wonderful day.